gives them.
Yeah. Well, and I think you probably had more confidence with the third because you're like,
sure.
okay, we're good. We know what happens when we're away.
Correct.
Yeah. Something to look forward to. Well, I hit the live button while you were talking, in case you didn't notice.
I see that. I think
yeah, no, I love to just sort of shoot the stars and go live. But welcome everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Ruby from the Feed Rail Institute. We are doing our Feed Rail Summit Lives with our amazing partners. And today we've got Jason Klop of Legacy Biome joining us. Thank you, Jason, for being with us today.
Yes, I'm excited to join the conversation and see where we go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're talking about FMT, which is fecal. What does FMT stand for?
Fecal Microbiota Transplant.
Thank you. Fecal microbiotic transplants. Jason is the founder. Yeah, it is. It is. Jason is the founder of Legacy Biome, which is a company dedicated to bringing high quality FMT, fecal microbiota transplant products to dogs and cats. With years of experience in FMT therapy and top tier manufacturing, he's on a mission to improve pet gut health and educate others along the way. I love that. How long have you been in business?
So Legacy Biome's been around, I would say probably around 4 years now. But my experience is really, it started out in human healthcare. So my background's as a naturopathic doctor, and I spent many, many years treating first digestive issues and then later on incorporating FMT for humans. And so still very much involved in that. I say it's like the human side is my main focus. It's where I have most of the experience, but we really applied what we learned in human drug manufacturing and making FMT products to what we're doing in the pet world. So we sort of, the human grade level when it comes to donor screening and manufacturing and on the production and everything that goes into that similar approach is now being applied to the pet world with dogs and now cats. And so that's where I got started and where mostly the research comes from. So during the course of our conversation, I'll probably be referencing more of what we know in the human side than actually exists in the pet side. But there is more research coming and taking place in the pet side broadly, and then also in this world of microbiome and FMT.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. I mean, I think a lot of what's happening in human healthcare in the food industry and sort of the pharmaceutical setup, a lot of that is mirrored in what we're seeing in the pet industry. But I would say that still we don't hear much about FMT in the human world. I'd say that that's not really very mainstream quite yet. I don't know, maybe
it's mainstream. No, not mainstream, but given I started FMT for humans in early 2018. So, what is this? We're looking at like 7 going on 8 years here. And the amount of awareness in that amount of time has increased significantly. The amount of clinical research happening in the space of FMT has increased significantly in that time as well. So I think the wave is coming. I mean, people often reference the documentary on Netflix where they talk about FMT. And so it is becoming more mainstream. And I think to your point, like oftentimes what happens is like humans become aware of something and they think, wow, this is important and it works and it's effective and it's safe for humans. Why couldn't we apply that to our own pets, right? So as humans become more aware of what good food is and how to eat good, healthy food, they'll then begin to start questioning what it is they're doing for their pets. And same thing goes for supplements and other things that otherwise are suggested and or used for humans. Oftentimes people are applying that same thinking or science to their pets. And I think in many instances, that's very safe and can work very well because the same diseases that humans get, pets are often getting many of the same diseases as well.
So is that what happened in your case? I mean, you were on the human side for quite some time. Was there a dog or a cat that sparked, well, maybe we should try FMT in our pets?
Yeah, no, it didn't start that way, actually. And I think it's changing. This is why it's really great that you guys and others like you are doing these types of conferences, because for many years, I would see vets at human conferences. And vets would be coming to these integrative functional style conferences, learning about what's happening in the human integrative functional space so that they could then apply that similar thinking to what they were seeing in their veterinarian practices. And so I would meet vets at these conferences, and I would ask them questions like, hey, what's going on in the pet space? Like, what's being done from a microbiome standpoint? Who's doing FMT? So I'd ask all these questions, and some were more aware of it than others. I think in the equine space, FMT has been happening for a very long time. And there were some, vet pioneers who were doing stuff. But broadly speaking, and it's understandable, but most vets and, of course, the pet parents don't want to be dealing with like the raw fecal product. They want something that's finished. They don't need to get their hands dirty. They're not dealing with smells and, all this stuff. And so that's where it became obvious to me, like there's really not a lot of opportunities or options that exist out in the market. We have this expertise in product manufacturing. We really believe in the importance of healthy donors that have been, antibiotic-free and all the other parameters that we look at from a screening standpoint. What if we could just blend all of our knowledge and expertise in human drug manufacturing to the pet world? And so that's how it came about originally.
Yeah, very cool. I'm really interested in hearing more about that screening process, but can you start by just talking a little bit more about why someone would use FMT for their pets? I mean, what is that a solution for?
Yeah, I mean, if you strip everything away, at the base of health is our gut and our gut health, right? Like if you're not digesting and absorbing appropriately, you could be giving the best food quality in the world, organic, grown in your backyard, you prepared it, whatever it is, it's just not going to be absorbed appropriately. And the microbiome, which is, consists of a lot of stuff. A lot of people think about bacteria, of course, that's a part of it. And that's a big part of it, but there's a lot of other things that go into all the metabolites that are produced by the microbiome. And then, of course, fungi, viruses, parasites, there's a lot happening. It's this huge, living, dynamic, ever-changing environment. And if that environment of these microbes that seek to be in balance are out of balance, and you create what's called dysbiosis, you then start to get inflammation. That inflammation begins to create issues where you're not digesting, you're not absorbing appropriately. A lot of dogs and sometimes cats are getting what's commonly like IBS or SIBO or inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis. And so when your microbiome and your gut is out of balance, you start to get inflammation and it starts to affect the rest of the body. So the obvious one is like, well, if your dog has diarrhea, in many cases, that's as a result of some like microbial imbalance. That's a very common one. But outside of that, the microbiome and the gut are associated with all sorts of stuff, including, of course, the skin. So dogs with itchy skin, atopic dermatitis, constant like recurring ear infections. And even it extends to behavioral stuff, whether it's anxiety or depression or aggression. I mean, there are some things that are just learned behaviors, a dog's been abused or some other things like that. But there's a huge gut-brain interface. And FMT, and again, I mentioned the human space, is being applied in tons of conditions like neurological diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, MS, and then, of course, all of the GI-related conditions and beyond. So the typical, though, the big players are dogs with or cats with diarrhea, which is fairly common, and then anything that's, digestive issues that are obvious, that the dog's bloating or even constipation, not as common, but is an issue for some. And then the hair issues, hair loss, itchy skin, and then some of the like fungal reoccurring infections and things of that nature.
That's so interesting because I think a lot of conventional veterinarians would treat something like chronic diarrhea or allergies with prescription medications like when they give often metronidazole. I always say that one wrong.
Yeah, metronidazole.
Yeah, that one. I see a lot of Apoquel for like, and they're like, oh, it's allergies and maybe it's environmental and maybe it's the food, but no one's really addressing the underlying issue of a gut imbalance.
Right. Yeah. And look, the gut and the healthy gut microbiome is not there without real food. I mean, I'm not plugging this purely because we're on this topic of feed real. It's just, it is so foundational. Like if your dog or cat is having any issues, the first thing to try is to improve their diet. But in some cases, a lot of cases, even improving your food, and like whether it's raw or whatever the bend is that you're on, that will get you a certain distance. But if the gut dysbiosis and imbalance is severe enough, you're not going to be able to come back from that, especially if the dog's been on multiple courses of antibiotics. Even Apoquel is damaging to the gut and the microbiome. And so that's like the foundational thing. You must do that. If that's not working, you could try to incorporate FMT or do both at the same time, right? As you're improving the diet, you're improving the microbiome, and the two will work together very synergistically. So yeah, it's the antibiotic approach is kind of old, worn out, and is turning out to not work for a lot of these cases. And being on an Apoquel or other things like that long term is just not ideal, and it becomes hard to wean off of them.
Sure. Yeah, we keep going back. I am curious, for those of you that are joining us in our audience, if you've had a cat or dog struggle with gut issues like chronic diarrhea, or even chronic itching. I recall several dogs that have come to us thinking that their dogs just had fleas that they could never get rid of, and they kept administering like a topical, and then now an oral dosage of some sort of flea treatment, and come to find out it was just an imbalance. Jason, can you share some success stories where FMT has dramatically improved, a dog's health?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not like hands-on treating pets, but we get a ton of testimonials and things that come in through our website, and then vets. There's a lot of vets who order our products wholesale and use them out of their practices. I mean, the most dramatic ones are the ones where the dog has like really severe diarrhea and they can't hold it in, and they're ruining rugs, and the owner's ready to get rid of the dog basically because it's causing so much hassle for them. And they've tried all this stuff, the metronidazole and the other antibiotics and things, and they do FMT, and within days they're just boom, solid, normal, regular stool. So
Within
that's
days.
always, oh yeah, no, this can happen within hours to days where they'll respond and diarrhea is done, resolved. And this is not just me saying, there's other clinical studies that show this. So FMT as a treatment is now approved for C. diff, which is Clostridium difficile. So C. diff also happens for dogs, and in humans causes a lot of diarrhea and mucus and urgency and all the things. Still in the US, killing roughly 30,000 people a year. And a single treatment with FMT has a roughly 90% cure rate in humans, and also works similarly effective in dogs, especially with diarrhea. So that's a big one. And then there's been cases of dogs that are, the more severe ones that already, have cancer and have kidney disease and other things. And this will just extend their life and extend their quality of life and make the treatments and drugs and things that they're doing work better, be more effective, minimizing the side effects and that sort of thing. We had a dog once that it was a lab, loved swimming. And this was actually some friends of ours. And the dog couldn't go swimming because every time it would go swimming, it'd get an ear infection. And the dog just loves swimming. I mean, taking swimming away from a lab is like, it's like taking toys away from a toddler. Not good. And so they kept going to the vet, and they did allergy testing, and they did all the antibiotics multiple times. And I was like, hey man, you should consider FMT. Like, it's probably related, right? Something's going on. The ear has its own microbiome, even though we're not like doing a microbiome transplant in the ear. By fixing the gut microbiome, it'll affect all the other microbiomes. And so sure enough, she decided to give it a try. And since then, dog never gets ear infections, continues to go swimming. Scooby's the dog. I mean, Scooby even wants Scoop the name. I mean, come on, of course it wants to swim. And so that was another like example of like, wow, this poor dog, she was trying all the different diets and ordering foods from all these different companies and just couldn't seem to figure it out. And it was as simple as improving the gut microbiome, and it seems to, or at least now, how long is this going to last? Who knows? But it's very easy to get another bottle and treat again. But no longer getting the ear infections after swimming, which, think about it. Scooby now gets to swim and have a good time.
How does, besides those outward clinical signs like chronic diarrhea, severe itching or allergies, can someone test their dog's stool to find out if they have an imbalance in their gut?
Yeah, I mean, there are microbiome tests that you can do. Like Integrative Pet Labs, for example, has different parameters they're looking at as well, like whether it's seeing if there's leaky gut or if there's some inflammatory markers. There's companies out there that'll do like allergy type testing on their dog. So there's a variety of different tests that you can do to see, is there something wrong here? There are a lot of pet owners, though, who are being much more proactive about their approach to this. They're not waiting. And nowadays, more than ever, and this is, of course, a lovely thing, but people are adopting dogs, fostering dogs, getting rescue dogs. And in all of those cases, they typically have had a lot of exposure and a big question mark. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what's happened before they've come here. And we have rescues that we work with that order our product for all of their dogs, because when they come in, they're on a protocol. The protocol is like hit them with metronidazole, the antifungals, antiparasites, like hit them with everything, because we don't want to introduce a dog into the rest of our population that could then spread whatever bugs they have. And so they're restoring that way. So we're seeing a lot more of the proactive approach to care, not waiting until they're in overt clinical signs, and treating and rebuilding, restoring their microbiome to try to prevent that sort of thing from happening. So whether it be like they're just trying to have their dog live longer, healthier, be more energetic and active, or they have a question mark about where did they come from? We don't know what happened. And even if you get it from a breeder, many times people wouldn't know, was the dog born vaginally or via C-section? Who knows? Did it get any antibiotics? What's the vaccine history? I mean, there's just a lot of question marks. And so we're seeing more and more now, people are being more proactive, like they would be about using, say, a probiotic. But the comparison of an FMT to probiotic is just in a different league.
Sure. So are you saying then, if we can be proactive about this, that anyone could put their dogs on an FMT without any adverse effects, even if there isn't an imbalance in the gut?
Correct. Yeah, you could be proactive about it and just give them an FMT with the oral capsules, and probably they're going to see some benefit. But if they're already really happy, healthy, and everything's good, you may not notice anything. I mean, naturally, as we humans and our pets age, our microbiome health and diversity declines. That's a part of aging. And as that declines, you see more inflammation, and that's the start of the chronic diseases that ultimately, we succumb to something. But by improving your gut microbiome and the foundation that is health, you can delay the onset of some of these things. That's more of the proactive approach. Like by improving the microbiome from a dog that is, younger and healthier than where your dog is at, you're going to sort of turn back the aging clock of the microbiome and of the body more generally.
Yeah, very, very cool. I'm still amazed at how quickly someone might see results. I mean, within a couple hours is just, it's like, it doesn't hurt to try, you know what I mean? If you're, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the process a little bit. I mean, we're talking about a transplant of fecal matter. So talk to us about that. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, despite the name being Fecal Microbiota Transplant, we're sort of trying to move the branding a little bit away from that concept, although in the research, that's how it's predominantly referred to. I think microbiota transplant is the better way to go, because we're really transplanting the microbiota that are in the stool. A part of the manufacturing process is filtering out and getting rid of the typical things that would be in most of the stool, which is the fiber. And so once that's gone and you've filtered down, you're only really left with the microbes and all of the metabolites and things that are left in the stool. And so it's really a microbiota transplant. And so that processing is removing the fiber aspects. And then ultimately it goes through freeze drying, and you have a powder that's then put into a capsule. And then it's in a double encapsulated enteric coated capsule so that it begins opening up in the small bowel and making its way through the rest of the digestive tract. So there's no odor, there's no taste to the dog, none of that stuff. It's just easy to swallow and take in that respect. Of course, some dogs, it's a little tricky to get them to take a capsule. But otherwise, yeah, that's the very high level from a manufacturing standpoint, is like we're filtering out any of what would normally be considered the bulk of the stool, which is the fibrous components, and just focusing on the microbiome or the microbiota that remain. And that then goes through, several steps to then get into an end product, which are the capsules.
So what's the screening process for we'll just talk about dogs since that's our focus at this year's summit. What's the screening process for the dogs whose stools that you're collecting?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the obvious testing, which is like removing, recurring repeat testing to make sure there's nothing pathogenic or infectious in the stool, and that's being done all the time. Microbiome testing is a part of that, seeing what the health of their microbiome is, and making sure that that continues to be good and diverse and all of those things. But beyond that, and more importantly, of course, you want to make sure there's nothing infectious. But once that fairly low baseline is reached, the donor's history, where they come from, how they're raised, what they're eating is really, really critical. So the dogs in our program never been on antibiotics and don't get the typical conventional flea and tick medicines. They're minimally vaccinated. They're living in an organic, property, only eating organic foods. And the list just goes on and on. So they've been raised generationally this way to never have been on antibiotics and raised and reared naturally. So that's the really the key piece. Like, you could have a dog who would pass the screening requirements from not having an infection, but is their microbiome going to be really diverse? Because typically when even you're getting a dog from someone who's aware, you don't know, like, what did her mother, was the mother born vaginally? Was the mother on antibiotics? Because that passes down to the baby and it goes through the generations. So the legacy biome, the legacy aspect of the name, comes from this donor legacy. We really want to make sure from generations these dogs have been raised in a way to protect and preserve the microbiome, because it's such an important, critical piece. I mean, a lot of people probably listening are aware of like the importance of the Amazon jungle, and that is like a lung for our whole environment. Well, our microbiome is very similar. It's something that needs to be preserved and protected because it's so key to health and well-being. And a lot of dogs that's being lost through conventional care. And the diets that are really horrible to support gut diversity and well-being.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's happening on the human side too. Like the way that our flour, for example, is milled, and it's so processed that there's a reason why people who have thought they had a gluten intolerance, and they go to Italy and they're eating pizzas and pastas and not having any issues. And it's like, it's in our food chain, our food supply. Wow, this is also interesting. Please, guys, if you have any questions for Jason, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we'll ask them as we go. Can you share where these dogs are located? I love that they're preserving the diet and all eating organic food. Where they're located? Are there any like breed consistencies, or ages where you cut off, like, okay, you can no longer be a donor within our program?
Sure. Yeah. So we're predominantly working with Dr. Margot Roman. She's in Massachusetts, and so she's the one who's primarily focused on raising the dogs. Although we are expanding our program because we can't currently keep up with the demand that we have, and so we will be expanding to include more donors, but with the very same focus of being raised the same way, cared for the same way, naturally reared, generationally, no antibiotics, and the list goes on. So yeah, I mean, dogs, they would age out if they were to get sick or anything, pathogenic or infectious, something like that happened, they would be removed from the program. And so that's, but generally a younger microbiome is the preferred. Although, if a dog is really healthy and they're 10 years old, in theory, there's no reason that they couldn't still be an awesome donor because they still have the microbes that have been passed on generationally, but typically trends to younger dogs.
Okay. We have a question here from Sandra. This was actually going to be my next question. Do you recommend...
I was reading your mind.
Yeah. Do you recommend to prepare the gut with something like the Adored Beast leaky gut protocol, or something similar to increase absorption of the FMT?
Yeah, I would switch the word absorption with engraftment, because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get these microbes to engraft and become a part of the dog, in this case, is new microbiome. And that's the whole distinction between FMT and a probiotic, as a probiotic does not engraft. You can take as much of them for as long as you want. They don't become part of the microbiome, whereas FMT becomes a part of the microbiome. And so to Sandra's point, it's a good question. By doing some sort of a protocol beforehand, whether it's some antimicrobials or some things that support the gut, and I don't know the specifics of the leaky gut protocol, but I'm assuming it's, including some of those things, that can be helpful, yes, in like creating an environment that would allow for better engraftment of the microbes. So yes, that's an example of something you might do leading up to it. Now, a lot of pet parents that work with us aren't, doing a protocol beforehand, and they're just going straight into the FMT, and that is fine. But if you are doing a more integrative functional approach, or you have a functional integrative veterinarian, then by all means, that does make sense, yes.
Are there any situations where FMT wouldn't be recommended?
That's a good question. Not really, no. Even in like pregnant dogs or situations like that. I mean, if the dog is, and sadly we get this sometimes where between when the pet parent ordered the product and the product arrived, even though it's pretty quick, they've lost their dog. So, I mean, I don't know that it's a Hail Mary in the sense like they're already almost, died. This is not going to be a miracle for them. But otherwise, no, there's not really a situation where it could be harmful. There's no such thing as like a toxic dose. You can't give too much and harm the dog. It's like natural. And so, no, there's not really a case that this would be like a big no-no. In humans, we'll say like if a person's severely immunocompromised, that would be a reason to potentially be cautious about using FMT. But even then, it's being used in patients who are severely immunocompromised to improve their immune function. And so it's not typically contraindicated in any indication or disease.
Okay. Well, you mentioned earlier probiotics do not engraft into the microbiome. Does that mean that they're effectively not helpful?
No, they do have some transient benefit while you're taking them. So they can have some benefit while you're on them. But long term, I actually, this is a bit of a contrarian opinion, but I think probiotics long term, especially if you're taking the same strains, can actually create dysbiosis. They can create an imbalance in the microbiome because you're only pushing a few microbes, and you're giving a lot of them, so you're shifting the microbiome. Even though it's not engrafting, it's changing the environment. And an analogy that we could use, I mentioned the Amazon jungle, right? Like imagine you just planted you put in like millions of only one kind of tree. Well, you're going to totally change the environment, the types of animals that are there, the way the soil is growing, which trees are killed off as a result of this tree being there. And so it's, at a minimum, it has a transient benefit. Maybe it does little to nothing. Long term, I think it can be harmful, especially if you're focusing on single strains. So typically, I'd say, especially while doing FMT, just pause it completely. Don't use any. And if you do really want to use them in the future, then, cycle between strains. But really focus on the food. I mean, it's all about the food. The more diversity you're getting in the diet and the healthier and cleaner the food is, the better outcomes from a total health perspective and supporting the microbiome you're going to get.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. In fact, I'm a big fan of pulse dosing when it comes to supplements. Like there really isn't a supplement we should be adding in all the time, every single day for the entire duration of our dog's life. And there's that. And then also I've thought a lot about, when we're feeding probiotics, especially like a goat milk, right? For example, or kefir, things that are coming from different mammals, different animals, and introducing that into our dog's body or our cat's body. And they can only take so much from it, right? Because you're basically putting in a different animal's milk into them. So I think that you make a very, very good point about that. And I'm glad you mentioned it. I think we have one more question here. Let me pull this up. Oh, this is from your team.
Someone commented. It wasn't me, but whoever commented, kudos, good work.
Oh, I love that. I also wanted to ask about administration. I know these come in capsules, right? So oral administration, and I see the benefit of it going through the entire digestive tract. But are there any cases where rectal administration
We
could be
do
beneficial?
have a rectal enema that's available to veterinarians who order products and use them in their clinic. I think there's cases where that can be an advantage, especially for vets who are doing rectal ozone and things like that, and they want to apply this right after. Of course, it increases okay, you got to be is the dog going to hold it in? That's a question. So and it's a little more stressful than just giving them a pill. But yeah, I think there's cases where you could go rectally. But in the human research, comparing the effectiveness when treating, mentioned earlier, the C. diff, capsules have a roughly 90% cure rate, and a rectal enema has about a 60% cure rate. So, in that context, capsules are much more effective. But I do think there are potentially cases where doing a rectal enema could be an advantage. But for broadly speaking, 99% of pets out there, the oral treatment approach is going to be easier, less stressful. Don't need to worry about the dog holding it in, and you can keep repeating it. See, I think that's the real advantage. Like when you're treating rectally, you're not able to do this. I mean, you could in theory, but typically you'd be going to your vet and you're going to do this like once, maybe a month, or every couple of weeks or something like that. Whereas I think the real advantage with the oral FMT capsules is that you can keep treating daily. So you keep reminding the gut microbiome, like, this is what healthy looks like. This is what healthy looks like. And as you're doing that, you can begin to improve and expand the diet, right? Like if someone came into this and they'd be like, man, my dog has severe diarrhea, and they've been stuck on the typical approach, they're feeding kibble, whatever the thing is, well, they could do both at the same time, right? They're improving the microbiome, and as they're doing that, they're improving the diet and getting more diversity, nitty supplements and things of that nature to complement everything. And so as they're making these shifts, they're doing things that are supporting this new microbiome. And so I'm a fan of treating for a slightly longer period of time to get that full engraftment as the inflammation and all the other things slowly reduce.
What is that period of time? I mean, you mentioned that we might see changes or improvement within hours, but how long is a typical cycle?
Yeah, usually, and it really does depend on how chronic or severe it is. So if you're just doing this to be proactive and just try to get ahead of the curve and prevent some diseases and just give your dog a boost, you could easily do a month, one capsule a day. You may not notice a ton because the dog's overall healthy and doing well. It's what you're preventing that's the key. But if a dog's been sick for a long time and there's a lot of inflammation and there's a lot of issues, then at a minimum, you're probably doing 2 months and evaluating how are they doing. If they're responding really well, then 2 months might be enough, or you might decide to do another bottle and do 3 and just, see how things go. So a lot of it is just touch and go, see how the treatment goes. If you didn't notice any change or any improvement in the first month, like potentially it's a dosing issue, maybe you need to give a little more, or the issue is not the microbiome and there's some other problem going on that needs to be addressed, whether it's a dietary thing or they have like a thyroid or some other problem that's contributing to their symptoms. And so, you need to look more, take a deeper look. But broadly speaking, you'll know within the first month, are we seeing a positive change or not? And that'll be the indication whether or not you continue. And then I think there's, we're seeing this as well more and more just in the order behavior of pet parents is that they're doing like an occasional every 6 months or every year, they're doing another course just to boost the microbiome again and continue to see benefits.
Do you have clients that come in that refuse to make any changes to their diet and just simply rely on the Legacy Biome pills for improvement?
Maybe. I mean, I don't really interact with people at that level. But I'm sure there's people that are just, hey, this works and I can keep all the other stuff that I'm doing going and I'll just keep ordering on a subscription. And, so that probably exists. But I would like to think that most of the people that come to us, they really care about their pets. They're very aware of, that just typical kibble food's not the best for them. And they want to support them and they're willing to make a lot of changes. And so, yeah, I don't know how common that would be, but I'm sure there's a case somewhere where they're just stuck doing. And sometimes people, it's the best they can do, right? Is with their lives and their budget. And, there's so many factors that go into caring for an animal and caring for ourselves, frankly. But yeah, predominantly, I think people are much more awake to this idea of good food, good supplements, and giving the dog as much love and care as they can, and that usually includes making changes to their diet. And so, yeah, we see a lot of people though that have switched from a kibble diet to a raw diet, and some of them have issues. They'll have diarrhea, they'll have trouble adjusting to this new diet. And so that's a great opportunity to include FMT to rebuild the microbiome and make them tolerate it better.
Sure. No, that's a really good point. I think we do see a lot of people whose last ditch effort is to transition to fresh food, but unfortunately, there's been so much damage to the gut that a lot of dogs will have a hard time tolerating that new food. Oh, I'm going to start making that recommendation for sure if we're seeing people that are continue to have difficulty in that regard. Because what we end up seeing oftentimes is like reverting back to what they know and what's comfortable rather than
there's only so long one can put up with diarrhea before they're just like, I tried, I did my best, but like I can't keep getting these rugs cleaned. And you're seeing your dog struggle. So yeah, and I think it can be even proactively, like if they've been on a kibble diet, a poor quality kibble diet for a long time, like we know their microbiome is going to be damaged. And so instead of waiting until they develop an issue, as they become aware of this and start to make the transition, it could be something to do just to complement the two and get an even better outcome than one alone. But especially in those cases that you're describing, yeah, this is definitely worth trying to see, if that can be averted, and hopefully then the pet owner will stick with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jason, I'm really excited to have you in person at this year's summit here in San Diego. Hopefully you're looking forward to that trip as well.
Yeah. It's
where are you flying?
Vancouver, Canada. I've been all over the world, and trust me when I say this, there is no better place from a weather standpoint year round than San Diego. It just doesn't exist. It's beautiful there. It's phenomenal.
Well, we're excited that you're going to be joining us, and you're just a wealth of information. I think a lot of our attendees at the summit, we're going to have a healthy mixture of veterinarians now that the conference is race approved for CEs.
Oh, awesome.
But also, our 2.8 pet parents, a lot of them are feeding fresh food, but truly are struggling with some of the things that you mentioned: chronic soft stool or diarrhea, itchy skin, even though they're feeding the best diet or fresh food that they can. And so I think this is going to be a really helpful conversation, and you'll have a lot of people coming to your table to talk to you about Legacy Biome.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it, and I look forward to seeing you in person there.
Wonderful. Before we wrap up, one last question. What do you wish pet parents better understood about their pet's gut health?
What do I better? That's a good question. I think the importance of feeding more diversity. So including some, at a minimum, depending on what people are doing, but some minimum of fruits and veggies. Like expand their diet to include some diversity, even in the protein types. So don't just get your pet stuck on like just fish or just chicken or just beef. Like try to get diversity in the types of proteins as well as the plants and veggies. Mix it up, add different things. That keeps the dog from getting fussy to begin with, right? Like if you're always giving them the same thing and then you give them something else, they can start to get picky. But just including more diversity in what they're eating is really key. And then let your dog be a dog and like go swim and roll around in the dirt and be dirty, because that dirty and getting exposed to of their microbiome to all different kinds of environments is super healthy and important. And so as humans, we become like really hygienic and clean all the time, but it's not conducive to a healthy gut microbiome. And because the microbiome comes from the earth originally. That's bacteria. We evolved to have bacteria in our gut, and it came from the earth originally. Now let's try to avoid the pesticide sprayed lawns and things. But outside of that, let your dog be a dog and let them eat all kinds of different foods as best as you can.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you so much for joining us, Jason. Looking forward to seeing you in San Diego. For everyone else, looking forward to seeing you guys in San Diego too. We've got just a few tickets left for our summit in October. It's 11/12 here in sunny San Diego. Jason is right. You cannot beat the weather. And we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers and partners, just like Legacy Biome. So we do hope to see you guys there.
Awesome.
All right, Jason, take care. Thanks for joining us again.